Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
I love breaking new ground on the show, and although we touched on this in one prior episode, we go all in this week with my guest, George McCleary, who's the founder of Squatter Defender and Title Fraud Defender, and we're talking about how to protect your properties against squatters and title fraud. A lot of this episode. I can't wait for you to hear this because although some people think we're giving squatters a blueprint, we're telling you all the ways that you can protect yourself from this crazy thing called squatters. Let's get to the show. This is episode 171 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, George McCleary. George is the principal at McCleary Realty and Development. He's been doing that for a while, but he's got a new gig, and it is the founder of Squatter Defender and Title Fraud Defender. We're going to get all into squatter, and it's based on George's experience. George, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is an exciting one, and we were talking before about some commonalities on the squatter things, but this has only been going on for you with the squatters thing for about a year, right?
That's right. Yeah, it really started for me officially after I went viral back in February on Super Bowl Sunday with a video I made called I Stole a House, and that's what propelled me to viral fame and really got me into the whole squatting scene. And I learned a whole lot along the way, and then I decided to really kind of jump in with both feet.
Yeah. Have you found that recently squatters have become more, I guess I wouldn't say call them popular, but more known? Or do you think it's something that's always been going on, but now it's just becoming more of a thing that people are paying attention to?
I think that they've become a lot more emboldened is the word that I like to use, is they're really doing it without any sort of pretense of they're doing anything wrong. They're just, they're lying to homeowners, the police, and they're emboldened by a set of laws that really are not punishing them for committing what is an actual crime. Yeah. And they're gaining status as tenants due to lawyers that are going after them with the civil process rather than the criminal process. And that's just further emboldening them to collect cash for keys, get free housing, and not be prosecuted.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly. So I was a prosecutor for 8 years. So, I mean, this is something that I would have loved to sink my teeth into because I find it I remember when I first started seeing a couple videos and I'm like, like, why aren't the police doing this? It's clearly burglary. I mean, you're breaking into a house without permission. That's burglary. I don't understand what the problem is. At worst case, it's a trespass. But I don't understand how somebody who's squatting in your house, and we're not talking about 30-year presence where you've, created some common law rights to the property. We're just talking about you just moved in and changed the locks, and somehow now you think it's yours. It seems crazy. I mean, how is this even a thing?
Well, so you're right. It's not an adverse possession claim 99% of the time. That's where you're in there for
stay forever.
A decade or more. It varies state to state. But so it also gets conflated with that term every so often. But really what we're talking about is exactly what you're saying, Jonathan. It's a burglary. It's a trespass. But what's happening is the squatters have gotten skilled at occupying these houses and making it look like they actually have a legitimate claim to be there.
They have fake leases, right? I mean, that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, and even if they don't have a fake lease, there's variations in sophistication with these people. But even if they don't have a fake lease, if a police officer rolls up and you got one guy saying this guy is not allowed to be here, and the other guy says, well, clearly I'm allowed to be here. I've got all my stuff moved in. I got all my friends. Like, yeah, this is my apartment. Then the police officer is not going to lay his job on the line to kick somebody out who may have a legitimate contractual right to be there.
Yeah, and certainly not right on the same time as a call. Like, they need to investigate somebody's in the house. That's fair to me, but it's still weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but you've got the discretion of the police officer. And if you got a known bad actor in there, like in a small town, then yeah, the cops can say, okay, Frankie the Stealer, get out of there.
Yeah.
But if it's in a big city and they don't know him from Adam, and they see a guy who's, got his stuff moved in, there's a decent chance this guy's a tenant. And if you just go arresting these people because one guy says, hey, this is my place and he's not supposed to be here, then, the cop could get in trouble for that. So that's how they're initially pulling off the scam.
Yeah. As one, just before we get into a lot of the things from Squatter Defender and the solutions, and of course your background, but as one solution, just to always have cameras on the front, which are usually going to document how somebody got in. If they crowbar their way in, that's not a bad way to say, hey, I've got them on video crowbarring their way in and then moving their stuff.
Yeah. So in the Squatter Defender online course, there's a lot of different things you can do, but a lot of them are really, pretty obvious. A camera and an alarm system. And, we can get you a 50% discount if you enroll in the course. But if you have one of those, it's a massive benefit, because if you have footage that you can immediately send to a cop, because you can text a cop, he'll say like, all right, well, send me the video. Yeah. And you say, here you go. Here's this bad actor going into the house. And also it eliminates the passing of time in between when they go in and when the cop arrives. Because if you arrive a month after he's been there because you just haven't been to the place, then there's a pretty good chance he's gotten established. But even if he has, you've got a guy kicking in the door or doing something wrong. Yeah. If you got footage, then you're in much better shape than if you've just got a he said, she said for the police officer.
Yeah, the time frame is really important, because I assume that some of these squatters just put the stuff in their name. They have the electric in their name, and then the cops, if you're a cop, you can't kick them out. They have the electric in their name. Like, how would they get it in their name if they didn't have a lease? That's actually fair. It's still crazy, but it's fair. Is that what you're seeing? Like, people are getting so advanced that they have, power, gas, everything's in their name already, which seems weird that no one would alert the homeowner, but I guess
if they're offering to pay for it, then usually the electric company says, yeah, sounds great. You're going to pay me for this? I love it. Yeah. And so you can transfer the utilities, or you just call up and say, like, have his buddy call up and be like, hey, yep, I'm Jonathan. Like, I'm going to stop paying the electric here. So give it to, George the squatter, and everything should be just fine.
Yeah. I guess it's just kind of another sign of the times. Like, we can't just feel like, oh, we lock our doors to a vacant property and it's going to be fine, especially when you're online about it. For real estate investors in particular, you're posting about your new flip. You're basically giving a highlight reel for a squatter to come in and grab it, before it goes on the market, especially if they're savvy at doing it. Is that also something that you're seeing in terms of, if it's out there, you're giving them more options to get in there? And then, of course, we list it for rent and it's vacant and people can try to, get in there.
Oh, yeah. So information is out there, not only information about what properties are vacant or being worked on, how much they cost, and what these squatters can hope to extract. But then because there's so much information online, people are learning that this is a viable scam. Yeah, and it's given rise to a class of people that are actually doing it professionally. Mm-hmm. And not all of these are like homeless drug addicts. In fact, a lot of them are working professionals that have just kind of figured out that they can get away with it. And so if you can live in a $2 million house, like there's a guy up in Seattle who just goes house to house, like Bellingham or Bellevue, and he just lives for free in these $2 million houses until they figure out a way to get rid of them. In fact, he's found a way to extract money from the Housing Justice Project, the tenancy advocacy organization. I think he got like 80 grand from them. It's absolutely mind boggling.
It's kind of crazy to me, though, because it's definitely, well, I get, for burglar, you have to have the intent to commit a crime inside, which still would be, living there. But I guess that's the argument. But your worst case is still a trespass. So it should at least be on there. And then when you have a couple on your record, I don't know. But I can see it. Look, there's one thing that I think about. People can create things that normally weren't businesses and turn them into businesses. I always think of people who stand like at the edge of freeways. There was some video a few years ago of someone who then he did his day picking up, money and change from people, and then got into a white BMW and drove away. Mm-hmm. And you're like, really? Like, people are going to do this? Yeah, they're going to do this. Like, it's unfortunate, but yeah, people are looking for opportunities to get in there. And as you said, they're not all, homeless or just trying to figure it out or struggling. It could be anybody who's just trying to take advantage.
Yeah, no, that's one of the most shocking discoveries that I made during this whole journey is because leading up to this, I'd heard And I had friends who had squatters that were, not full-blown professional variety, but, really verging on it. They get in there, they lie to the cops, no fake leases just yet. But then the more I dug into it, I found out about the professionals. But leading up to that, all that I dealt with all my development projects and house flips was just like homeless guys who would go in there and I'd say, hey, wake up, it's time to go. And, slowly but surely they would make their way out. Yeah. I never actually had anybody like really fight back, but I had to stand there and make sure that they actually did it. Yeah. So was that a squatter? Not really. This is just a guy who's looking for a place to crash and, wasn't looking to cause trouble. These people that we're talking about today, the actual squatters, these are guys that are willfully and knowingly committing a crime. Yeah. And the real tragedy and the crazy part that makes it all crazy is they're not actually being prosecuted for it the vast majority of the time.
I remember seeing some article and it was talking about squatters' rights. And I was like, huh? Are we confusing something with renters here and squatters? Like squatters have no right to be in a building. So how are they have any rights other than just traditional human rights? But I mean, it's just getting a little bit crazy. And maybe I'm sure, me being a former attorneys are like, hey, this seems like a good thing to get on. These people actually have money. Like, let's try to work on this side.
Yeah, no, there's attorneys working on the tenant side that are, there's attorneys working on both sides. But what's been really shocking to me is the amount of attorneys that are working on the tenant side or the squatter side of things, because they find little holes in your contract. They find things you did wrong procedurally. And especially if you don't have an attorney that is dotting their I's and crossing their T's, they can go after you and really shake you down for a decent amount of money. And so what the cash for keys ends up being like a settlement that the attorney ends up extracting a percentage of. And cash for keys offers are sometimes in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah. They've gone up just for real cash for keys. So I'm just thinking personally, like, I wouldn't pay it. Like, I'm going to go to the wall with it. But I think everybody has a different thing of like, hey, I just want to get them out of there. I would feel really bad about myself if I paid someone $10,000 to leave my house that I never let them into. That would be really tough.
It's the worst, and I talk about that in Squatter Defender. I basically say like, hey, this brings me no joy to give this as an option. But at the end of the day, if you have a situation where, you're hell bent on going the civil route and you add up your costs between your court, your attorneys, and then like just more and more months of having a squatter occupy and destroy your place, then you really got to make a tough decision. Be like, all right, well, would I rather pay $10,000 and feel really terrible about it, or would I rather pay $60,000 and have gone through this whole process and pulled myself through a keyhole for the next 6 months? And a lot of people would pay that $10,000, and that's it is a solution. However much you have to hold your nose to do it, a lot of people are doing it. But the biggest problem is that it perpetuates the scam. Exactly. Then the guy says, "You won't believe how I just extracted $10,000.
I just made $10,000 and I lived somewhere for 3 months." That's a really fair point, though. You do have to weigh the balance. I remember I've told this story before. I did a flip in Sarasota like 15, 20 years ago. And I did it with people I knew. They were the contractors and I was the money. So it was just going to be a 50-50 traditional split. And then they were like, charging stuff on credit cards. So it wasn't working out. But in the end, I'm like, I was a prosecutor at the time, and I go to an attorney and I'm like, I want to sue them. I'm going to sue them for everything they got. He's like, listen, how much are you going to make? I'm like, I don't know. How much am I going to get from them? He's like, they don't have a lot. You're going to pay me $15,000 to get $10,000. That just seems stupid. And that's exactly what you're saying. How quickly do you want to solve the problem? And just like regular rental property owners have to think, sometimes people think, I'll just evict them. Well, okay. But once you serve them with an eviction, they could just put rocks in the toilet or cement in the toilet or, not be careful with mold. So we forget about the caretaker of the property thing, even though it is ridiculous. I can see people saying like, I'm just going to do the cash for keys. It really burns me up, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right, Jonathan. You can't draw water from a stone. If you go after these people as, in the civil process, you're essentially calling them a tenant. And
yeah.
And you can claim damages, but these are people that are desperate enough to be able to, break into someone's place and occupy it. They don't have a whole lot of money. They don't have anything to go after. So to date, I've never actually even heard a single case of all like the, many dozens or even hundreds I've studied where they actually went after a squatter or scammer in any sort of like civil process, trying to shake him down and get a judgment. And even if he did get a judgment, like, these people don't know.
What's it worth?
What good is it going to do? A useless judgment.
I mean, maybe if we see a website pop up that's like squatter offender and they're teaching them how to do it, maybe we go after that person. But I don't think that the rest of the people who are doing
maybe I'll do that.
Business.
It'll be my next profiteering off.
Right. You've done one side. So like, hey, let's try the other side.
That's the funny part about that viral video is people actually thought that I was a squatter. It was real tongue in cheek. I'm like, hey, this is how I stole a house. I broke into the lockbox. I went inside, I moved my stuff in. And then when the cops came, I showed them a fake lease. And so I'm going through this like as the squatter. But if you go to my profile, I'm clearly a real estate investor. But what happened was the video got taken down because I thought Meta or TikTok, they said, all right, this guy's committing a crime. We can't have this. But people downloaded it and then they started reposting it. And that's actually how things really went viral and got a little out of hand in terms of people not knowing that I wasn't the actual squatter.
It's hard to get that tongue in cheek when you're on the internet and just looking for a 5-second clip to rail on somebody.
Exactly.
Culture.
I had people saying they were going to track me down and shoot me and all sorts of crazy stuff. DMs that were like in all capital letters, wall of text,
Yeah. Oh, well, great. I can't wait to see the comments on this episode. Thanks, George.
Now I'm trying to clearly establish myself on the right side of things because, but even then people said like, hey, you're providing an instruction manual to squatters. And that, I totally get it. I totally get how people could think that, but it's really hard to scam people who know what the scam is. More often than not, people are getting scammed by things, processes and scams that they've just never heard of. They're like, oh, well, darn, well, I didn't know that was a thing. You mean that Nigerian prince didn't really have all that money?
Oh, wait, I did just send one of those emails. That's a really good point, though. I personally think, I don't think that you can defend well against anything unless the steps are out there. So I'd rather could it be a roadmap? I mean, I guess so. There's roadmaps to doing a bank robbery. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be able to do it successfully. They're probably going to fail miserably. So especially if I know how everyone's going to do it and I own a bank, then I can defend against it.
Exactly. Yeah. If I got a roadmap to how they rob a bank, I'd study it and be like, okay, folks, let's figure out how we can fortify this bank so that we're not vulnerable to this process in particular.
Yeah. And as we were saying before, a couple of the top tips are just extremely simple, like, have an alarm and put a camera on, especially when it's an investment property. You can always turn the alarm off or transfer the tenant then, but while it's vacant or, all of us who've done flips, I'm sure for you as well, like we've lost copper and stuff in the house and, this is just part of the property, the process. And you learn like, well, I should have had a camera on the front, in the back doors. Why not? They cost like $40 now for 2 cameras. I mean,
and the offer that we give in Squatter Defender, you actually get a free camera, which is really helpful. But really, if you have just a regular old alarm that you can transfer from property to property, that's what I started doing because the siren itself and the motion sensor, it's just so cheap and you like literally plug it into the wall. And if there's a siren going off and you get a notification on your phone, you can have it call the cops. But what we were finding was that it was contractors and like the window guy and the window guy's cousin didn't know the code. And so it would go off and say like, oh, sorry, the alarm is going off. And we'd have to give them the code. But now we just have the notifications. We pull it up and it's contractor. It looks a whole lot different than a guy who's trying to break in. So.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the same reason we used to say like what percentage of homes with dogs get burglarized? Very few because they make noise. So same if an alarm's going off, a squatter's not going to be like, well, if this thing goes off for a couple of weeks, I think it'll be fine. I'll just live with it. Just go to the next house.
This thing will stop. It'll probably not notify the cops or the owner or the neighbors. I think it'll just stick around. No, they're looking for low-hanging fruit. They're looking for the easy score. If they've done any research beforehand, they'll try and get somebody who's like out of state or something like that. But they're looking to like open the door, have nobody in there and nobody detect them for as long as possible. Because again, it's a time thing. Like time is not on your side as the owner. But if you're a squatter and you're like, all right, well, if I can just post up here for like, I just need a few days or a few weeks, for any rental property that's kind of sitting on the market or a house that's sitting on the market, yeah, I mean, you can get 2, 3, 4 weeks without anybody stopping by there or checking on you. No problem.
Yeah, I can just see it with, everybody having Ring doorbells now, someone just really going for it. And I can see this video of someone telling them, look, I see you pulling up with a truck. I don't think you're going to get it done. There's cameras all over. Like, okay, I'll go to the next one. But then you have them on camera to at least alert the police that they're looking to squat somewhere.
Yeah. No, you just don't become the low hanging fruit. And there's a ton of ways to do it. And I go over it in the Squatter Defender course, but they're all not expensive. They're all cheap and it just requires like minimal effort. But yeah, I mean, that's the biggest one is like, the alarm system and the camera, even just one like out front.
Yeah.
Like that makes all the difference in the world. And then you don't have to professionally install it. You install it yourself. You plug it into the darn wall.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's just getting something up that better than nothing. I mean, it's crazy though, because I do think of it, but my dad owned, a lot of properties, and we obviously didn't have the internet back then. So we were just hoping for the best. And I've seen squatters, I've gone to show houses and there's squatters in there and you're like, whoa, you tell them, hey, you said there wasn't a tenant. It's not vacant. Like there's someone in there. They're like, oh boy.
Oh, no, here we go.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important. Well, let's go all the way back, though, to your background. When you were growing up, when was the first time that you were thinking real estate would be something you would be interested in?
It actually was after college. I went to business school down in Atlanta at Emory, and I graduated thinking banking was the way to go. And I was working for Bear Stearns at the time. They went under during the recession, but I didn't last long. It was just a very short amount of time on the job before I realized, hey, you know what, this isn't quite right. So I did what anybody does when they need to sort of find themselves again. I went on a 6-month-long surf trip down to Australia. I lived there for 6 months and basically just traveled and had some fun, made some friends, read a big stack of books about what I wanted to do, different vocations that I was interested in, like, consulting. I knew I wanted to make some money, but I never really had interest in anything. And like everybody else in the real estate world, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I thought to myself, okay, this could work. And then I had a couple other ones that I sprinkled in there, and I came back and said, okay, I'm going into real estate. And that was at age about 23, and I bought a duplex the next year, and then a triplex, then a fourplex, and just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Well, how was it for those first few properties being a landlord for you? Obviously, you probably weren't thinking like, hey, one day there's going to be a problem with squatters. But what was the first kind of experiences for those first 10-ish, say, units as a landlord for you? Because it's tougher than people think, I think.
It's funny you mentioned that, because it wasn't a squatter that first got my attention in my first property, but it was a tenant he was an interesting guy, kind of a bad actor. That was my first taste of buying anything. And I was, 23-year-old kid. And when I went to look at the place, the guy was eating this massive bowl of Fruity Pebbles and like having milk fall down his face. And he was just a total
Fruity
mess.
Pebbles are pretty solid, though.
They are delicious, objectively. We can definitely agree on that. But he had porno mags strewn all over the place. The place was an absolute wreck. And I'm thinking to myself, like, holy smokes, am I going to buy this place? Yeah. I got to get rid of this guy. So I basically, I went to the agent. I'm like, would you buy this place? And he looks at me with like fear in his eyes. He's like, hell no, I would. Absolutely not. But if you can get rid of this guy, I think this place would be rock solid. And that was my very first real estate investment. And I did have to kick that guy out. And it was a bit of a process, but I got rid of him. And I worked on it myself. I did drywalling and painting and found out real quick what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And what I wasn't good at was everything, because I had done nothing.
Join the club. I'm in that club too. I'm a founding member of I can't DIY anything. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. No, I could DIY like the easy, like painting, let's go. Back then when you're 23.
I can do it, but I'd really rather not.
No, these days I haven't touched a paintbrush in a long time. But being at that age, you could just get friends over for free pizza and
pizza and beer, paint 6 rooms. A little crooked, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That text would stay on unread if I sent it as a 40-something-year-old man. But,
exactly. Yeah, you're gonna need like sushi and like high-end tequila to even get one room done now.
I would go to that. I would paint my friend's apartment for high-end tequila and sushi.
I would too.
But
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do that much, but I'd at least get like I'd do the rolling. That would be fair to me.
Yeah. No, I could do that. I could do that. It depends on the tequila. I would ask for brand name. Where's the sushi from? Are you going to get nigiri?
Yeah, right. Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope your eyes are opening to the issue of squatters. So, George and I talk about it somewhere during the show, I think at the end, so you're going to hear it again at the end. But we have links for you, and the links come with a code. The code is ZEN, Z-E-N, like the podcast. P.S. It's not an affiliate link. I don't get any money for it, but you will save 20% if you sign up for Squatter Defender, which is at squatterdefender.com, or Title Fraud Defender at titlefrauddefender.com. So you win. I win by giving you the information and having George on, but again, there is no benefit to me, so feel free to get your discount. Let's get back to the show. Well, so but as you were growing as a landlord and figuring out what you were doing in real estate, what were the parts that in the beginning and then growing that you started to really like the best beyond like, hey, these things can make money, they're good assets?
I've always really been a fan of tangibility, having a product, having something that I could touch and point to and say like, yeah, that was me. I did that. And that was one thing I didn't like about banking was that it was all, on computers and spreadsheets, and it didn't appeal to me, even though everybody knows, bankers make money. It didn't have the same element of like tangibility and like something I could display like real estate. And so when I fixed up that duplex, that first one that I bought, there was a real like before and after going. And social media wasn't a thing back then. Yeah. This is back in like 2004. But I was able to, show some before and after pictures to like my friends and parents. I threw a big party after I finished renovating it, and everybody thought it was cool. And I felt like, I felt pretty smart because I had it reappraised and refinanced. And suddenly, for the first time in my entire life, I had like a chunk of cash to work with. And I'm like, okay, whoa, this is the way. Yeah. And so, but the value was created by way of my actually creating something. And so it wasn't just dollars and cents, created out of thin air. Is because I was able to take the rent from $550 aside, which was that was what a 2-bedroom, 1-bath would cost in this part of town in Portland back then, $550 to $850. And so percentage wise, I mean, what is that? A 30-something, 40% increase? Yeah. Pretty darn good. So I was feeling pretty smart at the time, and that's really what made the difference for me.
Yeah, that resonates with me too, because even though my dad was a house flipper and I would been in so much real estate, when I did it for myself, the first time was probably 1995-ish. And I lived in a house. All I did was paint it, recarpet, get new appliances, and then sold it in like 18 months and made 25 grand. And I was like, this isn't bad. This actually makes sense. So this is what my dad was talking about. I think a lot of us have that kind of aha moment where it's like, and it is based on what you were saying, the tangibility and the value add potential of real estate, from the minimal part to the DIY part, even to the large scale. That's the option. You can always upgrade. And even if you do nothing, chances are in America that your real estate's going to appreciate if you've bought even in a okay, way. You should be fine.
You should be fine. And also, like a disadvantage that I had at the time ended up turning into an advantage. And that was being a 23-year-old kid who knew nothing, but also I was unmarried. I also could rent out rooms. And so the other room in the duplex, and I actually carved out a room in the basement of that same unit, I rented to roommates. And so not only was I getting the rent from the other side that was increased, but also my roommates. These are roommates that if they tried to move in with me today would not fly. They were like doing cocaine off the dining room table, and they were insane. But at the time, they were paying me $300 per month, which was a lot of money for me at the time. And so it actually ended up working great. And so these days, things have changed. I'm married and have a family, and I can't do that. And so, but when you're first starting out, it's actually a big advantage to have that flexibility and independence.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you add solid W-2 income onto that, and you can do it on your own, you can get the 2+1, which is my favorite. It's the 2-family with an illegal unit that can be used by the owner. You can use it as the owner. Sometimes you can't have a stove, but like, okay, whatever. You're 23, you got a hot plate and takeout. I mean, you're pretty much good to go.
The mother-in-law suite. Yeah, exactly.
It's great. And I do think that the room hack is still a great move, because on Bigger Pockets, a lot of time in the forums, I see kids in college, they're like, oh, what should I do? It's like, this is a no-brainer. House hack as many units as you can, or a single family, and bring your friends there. It's cool. Maybe one of them you don't like after a little while. They have their own room. just don't eat each other's Fruity Pebbles.
I did that later on when I was in a band. I had my bandmates living in the house, and it was essentially just another house hack. That was just, one or two places after that. Still in my mid-20s, but I lived where I wanted to live. And so I wasn't a real estate play in that it made like a ton of money, but I was living with who I wanted to live with. They were paying me rent, and I was only occupying 1/4 of the house. And so my rent, I think the mortgage was like $2,500 a month, but I was getting almost that. So I was still living very cheaply, and I was able to qualify for it because I had a W-2 at that time. And even though I wasn't really making a whole lot on that W-2, it made getting loans easier. Self-employment loan qualification, anybody will tell you, can be hard at any level.
Not fun. Yeah. But that's where appreciation comes in. So even if you're at break even, which right now in today's market, even with rates dipping a little bit, you might be in break even or net negative on a house hack. But if you buy right, maybe in 2 years, you're up $100,000, which is very possible. At least in my markets, it's almost likely. So you make $100,000 in a year, then you refinance, like, wait, now I have a down payment for another property and I can leave and rent this whole one out. That's really the trajectory for younger people or people who are single or just a couple who both agree, hey, we can do this together, like you said, because that's the best way in to make the most money.
Absolutely. Yeah. And plus your interest payment on that $2,500 or on my $2,500, there was a portion of that was principal and part of it was interest. So the principal part is out of one pocket and into the other. And so by the time that I actually sold that place, I'd paid down principal. I'd gotten a tax break on the interest that I'd paid. And so even though I was in quote unquote the negative on the house hack, it would still save me a bunch and put money in my pocket by the end of it.
Yeah. So, over your years, though, what's your favorite asset class just for you as an investor to buy? If you were buying right now, you go out and you want to get a new property, what are you looking for?
So it's changed a lot over the years. At first, I was thinking small multifamily, single family. And these days, I will still absolutely do a single family, but it's harder to cash flow a single family now than it may be ever in history. It's not an easy thing. And so these days, right now, I'm building multifamily. I've got a development project here in Portland, 24 units, and then a industrial project. That's out in Hermiston, Oregon. And so my favorite asset class right now is anything that makes me money because, but if I had to pick, I would probably pick a light industrial flex space contractor garage. That's awfully specific, but that's what I'm building out in Hermiston and Stanfield specifically. And I really like that because it's a lower cost of construction. It's simple to build. I can tell you, building multifamily, especially in Portland, can be a real chore in terms of getting things permitted and going vertical. But for new purchases, I will never fall out of love with multifamily. That's what I've always had in my career. I've owned places big and small, and there's always going to be a need for people to have a place to live. That's never going to go away. And all the other asset classes, I got love for them, except for retail. Never liked retail. But yeah, no, that's I'd say if I had to pick a long-term marriage partner in the asset classes, it would be Class B small multifamily.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I like what you said about flex, though. We've had a couple industrial flex shows, and I think it's just, your cost to build is cheaper. The land cost is almost nothing because they're in these, quasi-industrial areas. But now they could be almost anything. You could put a go-kart place in there and they can make a lot of money. So I like it. I think it's an alternative now to what all the commercial assets that are going to be out there vacant. We'll see what happens with that, though.
Absolutely. And I've lived in all these. I've lived in like a huge multifamily building, small multifamily, and a single family. And the reason that I'm never going to fall out of love with small multifamily is that, with a big building, you're going down a hall, up an elevator, down another hall, around the bend, and it takes you 5 minutes to get there from when you walk in the door. Whereas when I was living in that duplex with the guy with the Fruity Pebbles, it took 1 second. I just rolled up and I walked right in, just like it was a single family house. And I had a shared wall, and maybe my neighbors would make noise, but it wasn't as much of a thing. I only had one neighbor at the time. And then when I was with a fourplex, then maybe got a couple more neighbors. But it's not the same as having 150 neighbors and you got to go up an elevator 10 stories. Some people love that, and maybe you'll get a view, but that's why I think it'll never go out of style. And that's why building duplexes, the infill housing that you're seeing these days, I think that's the way.
Yeah, and obviously we were talking before. I mean, we were talking in the squatter conversation before we hopped on, but like providing housing now is so important. We're in a shortage. So if you can provide, I would say, reliable housing, because affordable housing has two different connotations, but building reliable housing for any consumers who are out there is going to be helpful moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's a big trend of infill housing getting built, cottage clusters, ADUs. And I think that's really fabulous. You're getting new, nice product, and it's not huge, but it doesn't need to be huge. It's well located. People are going to always want to live in a good location, even if it means giving up a little bit of space. And, eventually people might want to move to the sticks. And that definitely became a thing during COVID. But a lot of times you're going to see it within the cities and within the locations that people want to live, and zoning laws are changing, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, out west, you're definitely seeing more opportunities in larger ADU options, California, Seattle, and maybe where you are in Oregon, because the ADU options are, hey, you can put now a 4-unit behind you because we need housing. Like, we don't have any housing. And I know a couple of people in San Diego where that's definitely an option. As long as you have enough space for parking, you're really going to be in good shape for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if all else fails, you can always just steal a house, like we were talking about before with the squatting.
We've given the blueprint. That, we were saying that before. I think it's a fair point for people to say, like, hey, you're telling people how to do it. But all that stuff, you can just type that into ChatGPT. They tell you anything that you want these days and how to do it. So knowing how to fight back is important. And just knowing how to protect yourself. I would assume that if they go on Squatter Defender, follow it, like the chances of them getting squatted are almost zero. I mean,
yeah, no, and who knows? Maybe someday we'll buy Squatter Defender or Title Fraud Defender and use it as their own personal criminal blueprint. It's definitely possible, but I mean, that's one of my goals, is to really spread awareness of this. And people are pretty aware of squatters, but there's not a ton of awareness of title fraud. Yeah. And I learned about that because I heard about a real insidious squatting method where they actually steal the title and move in.
Yeah.
And these are not, like, a lot of times not the brightest criminals, because you're really putting it out there. Like, you put the title in your name and you move into the house. Right. You're really kind of in the crosshairs at that point. But so there's that type of squatting, which is deed fraud squatting. But more often than not, people are stealing these home titles in order to resell the houses to steal the home equity. Yeah. And so we talked a little bit before about...
I saw a couple articles about that happening too. I think it happened to somebody that I know. And it seems crazy that these things can happen, that someone can tell you, like, hey, you don't own your property anymore. And you're like, what? But there is I think the word defender is really important for both, because what you're trying to do is just protect yourself from somebody doing it to you. Hopefully other people listen and they're all protected. But in the end, if I have 20 properties, I want to make sure mine are locked down before, like, my neighbors are.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so the thing about deed fraud is you actually can't actually stop it, because it starts with the process of recording a deed, and municipalities all govern that in their own way. But generally, it's kind of the same. You serve them with like you give them a document, and it has your name on it as the grantor, grantee, property address, notary stamp. But like, that's the only real security measure, is a notary stamp. Like, okay, a notary was here and made sure these guys signed this thing, right? Yeah. And it's a stamp. It's not $100 bill with like a watermark or a seal or a stamp. It's a rubber stamp. And so if you're working at the county recorder's office and you're seeing dozens of these things per day, they're like, all right, looks like Jonathan sold his house to George. Here we go. Ka-chunk. Record. And then
it's also not very hard to become a notary, so you could really go in on that together and get that business rolling.
Exactly. Yeah. Or steal somebody's stamp. It's if your objective is to forge one of these documents, you're going to spend a whole lot less time forging a deed than you are forging like $100 bill, or $1 bill for that matter, or making like a fake ID, which is actually part of the process of it's basically really sophisticated, really high dollar value identity theft. Because if you get the fake ID, you steal the house, you steal the deed in the name of the fake ID. The clock is ticking at that point to either sell the house and claim the equity with your stolen identity into the stolen identity's bank account, or you take out loans and that you get the money that way. And in that way, there's less of a chance that anybody's going to go poking around. But you can sell it to a wholesaler, and these processes, as we both know, from, hey, I want to sell to my house to closing with a wholesaler, that can happen in as little as like a couple of weeks, sometimes less. And so the clock is ticking. So if you're notified straight away, like, hey, Jonathan, your title's been transferred. Just want to make sure you know about that, right? You're selling your house. But if you say like, no, what was that? No, something's wrong. He'd say, okay, all right, well, here's what you do. And that's all that title fraud defender is. It basically alerts you straight away that your title's been transferred, and that keeps your equity from being stolen. That's basically it. You still got to go do a quiet title action and go through the steps. And we show you how to do that. But the biggest thing is, if you lose your home equity, title insurance doesn't actually cover you unless you've got a special policy, either the homeowners or the extended policy, because title insurance covers you from the day you bought the house backwards, but not forwards for fraud and impersonation. So
that makes sense.
So if they make off with your equity, your title insurance company is going to say like, oh, you want us to reimburse you that $400,000 that got stolen from you? Yeah, here's the thing. Sorry, Jonathan. That's not going to happen. So good luck with that.
The one thing I was thinking when you were talking is that I feel like criminals and everything around getting real estate deals done has increased in technology like a million times, but the actual record keeping at the county level is still like, the Flintstones.
Dinosaur.
You go in there and they're like, let me go into the file cabinet. And you're like, what? We have a list, we have 10,000 things we haven't scanned yet. Like during the pandemic, of course, it was an issue, but like there were title transfers that took 2 years. That makes it ripe. There's the property in my name that I sold and flipped like 5 years ago, and I go on the county website, it's still in my name. It doesn't matter how many times I call them to tell them I've sold the property. I don't understand why you keep sending me stuff. Like, I'm done. They just can't get their act together. I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah, I heard about a county that implemented title protection in a similar way, where they would notify their constituents of any sort of title transfer. And what people tell me a lot of times, they're like, hey, I hear that the counties do it. And I'm like, yeah, they do it sometimes, but they're basically calling me and saying, hey, can you cover my entire county? Yeah. But then the ones that have done it themselves, like built out their own system, it took this one county 3 years to actually build the system to notify their constituents about a title transfer, which talk about the slow gears of government. If you want to track it, you could trust your government, but you're probably better off going third party. Yeah.
Well, when you made the video that went viral, what was the intent? Because I know you didn't think you were going to end up here, this about a year later.
I was just fed up, Jonathan, honestly, because at the time, over the past few years, Portland has had some challenges, and, I won't turn this into a show about politics, but, I was just a little fed up with some of the policies that were happening here in Portland. And notably, these like the policies for like tenants, squatters, and all these affect my livelihood directly. And so I've let some of my political opinions be known online, and they're not crazy. They're not far left. They're not far right. I feel like they're very middle ground and reasonable. And I had some people kind of fire back and fight back. And I'm like, okay, I'm still just going to talk about it no matter what people think, especially about stuff which concerns real estate, because I've been in the game 20 years. I know a whole lot about it. And so because it was a matter of policy, that's why I decided to make the video. I'm like, hey, this policy is insane. It's costing me and my colleagues money, and it's unfair. It's unjust. The pendulum has swung too far in the wrong direction. I understand protecting tenants from bad actors and landlords that are going to take advantage of them, and that is absolutely a thing. But it's gone too far. And there needs to be protections in place, not just for one group of people, the tenants. It needs to be for both.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, like I said, the second that I saw something that said squatters' rights, I was like, I think we've just pushed this button a little bit too far in one direction here. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. Squatters' rights shouldn't be a thing. I mean, there's tenants' rights, because tenants should have protections. Yeah, I mean, they have a contract, and there should be protections, honoring that contract. And they usually have less money than landlords. So yes, these protections do need to be put into place. But, to what extent? For a lot of people, it'll never go far enough. until all housing is basically communally controlled or by the government, and that doesn't work. I'm pretty sure we can all agree on that, but most of us can agree on that. So.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, so where's the best place for people to find information about Squatter Defender and Title Fraud Defender?
So squatterdefender.com is where you're going to want to go. That's a course. It's about 2 hours of instruction with quizzes and notes, and basically tells you everything you need to know about squatter protection, detection, and ejection. So what to do to protect yourself from squatters, how to detect if they're there, and most importantly, how to get rid of them if you have them. And that's really kind of the $1 million question. And then titlefrauddefender.com, that's where you get the Title Fraud Defender product, and that'll monitor your title. The market leader in this space is Home Title Lock. They charge $20 a month. Depending on how many properties you put in, it's anywhere from $2 to $5 per property at Title Fraud Defender. Yeah. And we basically just created a much more efficient system than the market leader. And so it's really kind of built for investors, because we've got the option to add multiple properties and have the cost per property really go down significantly if you add more properties and get a longer term subscription. So built for investors, and it'll keep you safe.
Yeah. And where's the best place for people to reach out to you personally?
So I'm pretty easy to find on social. McCleary Realty and Development is the name of my real estate company. So it's MRD Portland on Instagram, TikTok. If you just Google George McCleary, you'll be able to find me on social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any sort of squatter related issues, I'd be happy to tell you what I think. I have had plenty of people reach out and say like, all right, here's my situation. What should I do? And that's the thing, Jonathan. Every situation is completely unique. There's several moving parts, and so I take them in and I try and figure out exactly what the best solution is, because you never really know. But the best thing you can do is arm yourself with knowledge about how to prevent this stuff from happening to you, and then what to do if you do have a squatter, and if you get your title stolen. These are all things that I'd be happy to help you with.
Yeah, and you have a special promo code if anyone is interested. And since we already talked about this, just so you know, if you use this special promo code, you get a discount. I don't get anything. It's not an affiliate link. It's just going to help you get a better deal. Go for it, George.
That's right, Jonathan. The promo code is Zen, and that gets you 20% off of either Squatter Defender or Title Fraud Defender. And unfortunately, Jonathan doesn't get any of that. But that's because I asked him, hey, do you want a piece of that action? And he said, no, I just want it for the benefit of my listeners. So altruistic, Jonathan, I salute you.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, look, just having the knowledge and having all the guests on the podcast and having you in here to talk about it, like, it's already a benefit to me. So I'm glad it's a benefit to everybody else. But yeah, this has been a great episode. I think it's something that we've only touched on a little bit on Lake of Devatha's episode. So it's nice to get the full spectrum here. And I think they can follow up and get more information, because I think it is something that we need to worry about as homeowners, investors, when there's properties that are changeover, properties that are flipping. I would never want to be in this situation. So I really appreciate you spending the time today. I'm glad we got in touch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And shout out to Leica, also one of my favorite people. Go to her social page and see all about her squatter story. It's harrowing. It involves stripper poles and puppies peeing on carpets, and it's police raids. It's a real page turner. So
her story, though, just to get this all complete, though, it's interesting because the squatter was completely indignant. No, I live here. That's what we're up against. So it is something that you should follow up. Look for George's viral video. Watch Leica's video as well. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jonathan. Thanks so much for having me.
Yep, that was George McCleary of Squatter Defender and McCleary Realty and Development. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the episode so you can get your preview of next episode coming up on Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's been Augusty, because in August, what happens is some guests adjust their time. We had 3 or 4 people who need to reschedule for September. That's awesome. We have a full slate getting ready to record in September. I'm going on 2 vacations in August, so by the time you hear this, I'll already be back. But because of those anomalies, the next episode is going to be just me. So I'm going to be talking about my current acquisition that I'm attempting to close in Black Mountain, North Carolina. It's my first foray back into short-term rentals, so I'm going to talk about how I figured out the market, what I did while I was there, and how I'm going about the acquisition. I've been told that it would be helpful if I did a little more on the solo episodes, just because it's more of a deep dive into my practice as a real estate investor. So here we go. The stars aligned, the guests move their podcasts, and next episode, you're going to have just me talking about my new short-term rental that, as of the time of recording, I'm doing inspections in 2 days. See you then.